What kind of person could commit a crime so gruesome, so meticulous, and leave behind a scene that still haunts Hollywood decades later? This is the story of the Black Dahlia, a case that has baffled detectives and captivated the world for over 75 years. Who was the Black Dahlia, and why did her story end in such tragedy? In January 1947, the body of Elizabeth Short, a young aspiring actress, was discovered in Los Angeles, brutally murdered and left in a way that shocked even the most hardened investigators. This case remains one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries, filled with tantalizing clues, bizarre suspects, and endless speculation. Join us as we unravel the layers of this frightening case, exploring the life of Elizabeth Short, the grisly details of her murder, and the countless theories that have emerged over the decades. We'll examine the evidence, the suspects, and the enduring fascination with this unsolved crime. Don't miss this gripping exploration of one of history's most perplexing mysteries. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for an exclusive analysis of the most compelling theories surrounding the Black Dahlia. Los Angeles in 1947 was a city shrouded in mystery, where sunlight danced across palm-lined streets and shadows lingered in unexpected corners. The sprawling metropolis hummed with an electric energy, a place where dreams collided with harsh realities, and every street corner seemed to whisper untold stories. Elizabeth Short arrived in this labyrinth of hope and desperation, a young woman whose presence would become an enigma that would captivate an entire city. Her journey began long before she set foot in California, rooted in the modest landscapes of Massachusetts, where she was the third of 5 daughters in a family that knew both fleeting moments of comfort and persistent economic struggle. From her earliest years, Elizabeth possessed a quality that set her apart. Her dark hair framed a face that seemed to hold secrets, and her eyes, deep and compelling, suggested a spirit that refused to be confined by small-town expectations. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than physical appearance that defined her. There was a restlessness, an undefined ambition that burned quietly beneath her surface. The post-war landscape of America was transforming, and Elizabeth was a product of this metamorphosis. Young women like her were no longer content to follow the traditional paths laid out by previous generations. Hollywood beckoned, not just as a place, but as a promise. A promise of reinvention, of becoming someone entirely different from the person you once were. Her journey westward was not a single, dramatic decision but a gradual unfolding. Each step was calculated, each move a carefully considered attempt to break free from the limitations that had defined her life in Massachusetts. The long train ride across the vast American landscape was more than a physical journey, it was a metaphorical transition, a crossing from one possibility of life to another. Los Angeles greeted her with a complexity that defied simple description. The city was a living, breathing entity, part glamour, part grit. Hollywood Boulevard sparkled with its marquee lights and celebrity mystique, while just a few blocks away, less glamorous neighborhoods told different stories. Elizabeth moved through these spaces with a combination of caution and curiosity, her Midwestern sensibilities gradually adapting to the city's unique rhythm. She took various jobs to sustain herself, waiting tables, working clerical positions, always maintaining her core dream of breaking into entertainment. Her social circle became a mosaic of aspiring actors, servicemen recently returned from war, and individuals navigating the complex social landscapes of post-war urban life. Each connection was a potential pathway, each conversation a possible opportunity. But something else was brewing beneath the surface. Elizabeth seemed to attract attention, not just because of her striking looks, but because of an intangible quality that made people take notice. She was simultaneously vulnerable and resilient, naive and streetwise. Men were drawn to her, women were intrigued by her, and the city itself seemed to be watching her with an almost predatory interest. Her nights were filled with a blend of hope and uncertainty. Parties in modest apartments, chance encounters in dimly lit diners, conversations that promised everything and guaranteed nothing. Los Angeles in 1947 was not a place for the faint-hearted, and Elizabeth was learning its unwritten rules with a mixture of determination and growing wariness. Rumors and whispers began to circulate. Small, seemingly disconnected incidents that would later take on a more serious significance. A missed phone call. A canceled meeting. A photograph left in an unexpected place. The city was preparing something, though no one, least of all Elizabeth, could have anticipated the narrative that was about sooner or later unfold. The entertainment industry of that era was a labyrinth of broken promises and calculated risks. Casting couches, exploitative contracts, and the constant psychological warfare of ambitious individuals created an environment where dreams could transform into nightmares with shocking rapidity. Elizabeth navigated this world with a combination of hope and growing skepticism, understanding intuitively that survival required more than just talent. Her family back in Massachusetts followed her journey with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Letters would arrive, filled with carefully curated descriptions of her life, hints of potential opportunities, suggestions of connections that might lead to her big break. But between the lines, a more complex story was always present. A story of struggle, of resilience, of a young woman determined to define herself on her own terms. As January 1947 approached, something in the atmosphere of Los Angeles seemed to change. The light took on a different quality, shadows seemed to lengthen, and the city's constant hum acquired a more ominous undertone. Elizabeth Short was about to become part of a story that would transcend her individual existence, a story that would capture the imagination of an entire nation. Little did she know how profoundly her life was about to intersect with the darker currents that flowed beneath the city's glamorous surface. Los Angeles was preparing to write a chapter that would become legendary, a narrative of mystery, tragedy, and the unpredictable nature of human desire. And Elizabeth Short was at the center of it all, her story just beginning to unfold. In the quiet, tree-lined streets of Leimert Park, where morning light typically filtered through carefully manicured gardens and post-war bungalows stood as testaments to suburban tranquility, January 15, 1947, would become a day etched forever in the city's traumatic memory. The neighborhood, typically a sanctuary of middle-class dreams and familial comfort, was about to be irrevocably transformed by a discovery that would shock the collective consciousness of Los Angeles. Betty Bersinger, a local resident, was walking with her young daughter that crisp winter morning, her breath visible in the cool air, her mind likely occupied with the mundane thoughts of daily life. The neighborhood was awakening, gardeners tending to their lawns, milkmen making their rounds, the rhythmic sounds of a city emerging from its early morning slumber. Nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to witness. The body lay exposed, a grotesque tableau that seemed almost theatrical in its carefully orchestrated horror. It was not just a crime scene, it was a statement. A declaration of something darker, more profound than a simple act of violence. The victim was a young woman, her body positioned with a precision that suggested something beyond random brutality. This was deliberate, almost ritualistic. Elizabeth Short, soon to be immortalized as the Black Dahlia, had become more than just a victim. She was now a symbol, a canvas upon which someone had painted a nightmare of unprecedented brutality. The body had been meticulously cleaned, drained of blood with a surgical precision that suggested the killer possessed more than just murderous intent. This was not a crime of passionate rage, but a cold, controlled performance. The corpse was bisected at the waist with a skill that suggested medical knowledge or professional training. Each cut was clean, almost surgical, a chilling demonstration of technical expertise. Her face, despite the horrific mutilation, retained a haunting beauty. A macabre, almost calculated smile seemed etched into her features, not a natural expression, but something deliberately positioned, as if the killer was sending a message. It was this detail that would transform the murder from a mere criminal act into a psychological puzzle that would captivate investigators, journalists, and the public for generations. Leimert Park, a neighborhood that represented the emerging middle-class aspirations of post-war Los Angeles, became ground zero for one of the most infamous murder investigations in American criminal history. The pristine streets, the well-maintained homes, the sense of suburban security, all were violated by this singular act of extreme violence. When law enforcement arrived, even seasoned detectives were stunned. These were men who had witnessed the worst humanity could offer, veterans of a world war, survivors of countless urban crimes, yet this scene defied conventional understanding. The absence of blood at the site suggested the murder had occurred elsewhere, that this location was merely a stage, a carefully chosen platform for a macabre public display. The Los Angeles Police Department, already wrestling with its own internal complexities and a reputation for corruption, found itself thrust into a media spotlight. This was not just another murder investigation, this was a narrative that would define an era, a crime that spoke to deeper, more unsettling social currents. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Newspapers, always hungry for sensational stories, descended upon Leimert Park. Photographers captured the scene, their flashbulbs creating a grotesque choreography of light and shadow. Reporters interviewed neighbors, pieced together fragments of Elizabeth Short's life, transforming her from a victim into a cultural phenomenon. But who was Elizabeth Short beyond this horrific moment? She represented a generation of young women who had migrated to Los Angeles with dreams of reinvention. Aspiring actresses, filled with hope, navigating a complex social landscape where opportunity and exploitation existed in a delicate, dangerous balance. Her story was not just individual but collective, a narrative about ambition, vulnerability, and the predatory undercurrents of a rapidly changing society. The murder raised profound questions that extended far beyond the immediate criminal investigation. How could such a brutal act occur in a supposedly civilized society? What darkness resided beneath the glamorous veneer of post-war Los Angeles? The Black Dahlia case became a mirror, reflecting societal anxieties about gender, power, and the thin line separating order from chaos. Investigators would pursue countless leads, interview hundreds of individuals, create elaborate theories. But the killer remained elusive, a phantom whose identity would become the subject of decades of speculation, countless books, and persistent urban mythology. Leimert Park would never be the same. The neighborhood that had represented suburban safety, post-war optimism, and the American dream became forever associated with this singular moment of inexplicable violence. Every manicured lawn, every carefully painted fence now carried a subtle undercurrent of unease. The morning of January 15, 1947, was more than just the discovery of a body. It was the moment when Los Angeles confronted a darkness it had long tried to conceal, a darkness that would continue to fascinate and horrify in equal measure for generations to come. And at the center of this narrative was Elizabeth Short, no longer just a person, but a symbol, an enigma, a story that would transcend her individual existence to become a part of the city's most enduring mythology. The murder of Elizabeth Short represented more than just a criminal investigation, it was a complex psychological drama that would expose the deepest and darkest corners of post-war Los Angeles. From the moment her body was discovered, the case became a serpentine narrative of investigation, speculation, and almost mythological intrigue. The Los Angeles Police Department of 1947 was a complex institution, still wrestling with its own internal demons of corruption and limited investigative capabilities. Forensic science was in its infancy, relying more on human intuition and traditional detective work than the sophisticated technological methods available today. The detectives assigned to the case were a breed of investigators forged in the crucible of post-World War II urban crime, men who had seen humanity at its most brutal during the war and thought themselves prepared for anything. Yet, the Elizabeth Short murder would challenge even their seasoned perspectives. The initial investigation was a labyrinth of frustration and dead ends. Every lead seemed to dissolve upon careful examination, every promising theory crumbled under scrutiny. The crime scene itself provided maddeningly limited information. The meticulous cleaning of the body, the surgical precision of the mutilation, and the careful positioning suggested a killer with extraordinary self-control and potentially professional training. Detectives interviewed hundreds of potential witnesses. Hollywood's peripheral social circles became a hunting ground for information. Aspiring actresses, bit players, bartenders, and hangers-on in the entertainment industry were systematically questioned. Each interview peeled back layers of Elizabeth Short's complex social life, revealing a young woman who moved through multiple social circles with a chameleon-like adaptability. The media played a crucial and often destructive role in the investigation. Newspapers, always hungry for sensational stories, transformed Elizabeth Short from a murder victim into a larger-than-life persona. The nickname Black Dahlia, inspired by a popular film noir of the time, took on a life of its own. It was a moniker that simultaneously romanticized and commodified her tragedy, turning her personal suffering into public entertainment. Then came the letters, cryptic, provocative communications that would become a defining element of the investigation. Sent to various newspapers and law enforcement agencies, these missives contained personal items belonging to Elizabeth Short. Each letter was a psychological puzzle, challenging investigators to distinguish between genuine communication from the killer and the potential machinations of attention-seeking individuals. The letters were carefully crafted to generate maximum psychological impact. Some contained intimate details about Elizabeth's life, while others seemed deliberately designed to mislead. Handwriting experts, forensic linguists, and detectives spent countless hours analyzing every nuance, every punctuation mark. Were these the authentic communications of a killer, or an elaborate psychological game designed to confuse and manipulate? Dr. George Hodel emerged as one of the most compelling suspects in this intricate narrative. A wealthy, sophisticated physician with a reputation for unconventional behavior, Hodel represented a particular archetype of mid-century professional masculinity. Intelligent, charismatic, and deeply complex, he existed at the intersection of medical professionalism and potential psychological dysfunction. Decades later, his own son, a retired LAPD detective named Steve Hodel, would become convinced of his father's guilt, publishing multiple books detailing his investigation into the family's dark history. The evidence, while circumstantial, was nonetheless provocative. George Hodel's social circles, his medical training, his documented bizarre behavior, all seemed to create a profile that could potentially match the killer's characteristics. But Hodel was just one of many suspects. The investigation uncovered a complex web of potential perpetrators. Former boyfriends, Hollywood periphery characters, drifters, and individuals with documented psychological issues all became part of the investigative tapestry. Each suspect brought their own unique narrative, their own potential motivations. The psychological profile of the killer became a subject of intense speculation. Forensic psychology was a nascent field in 1947, and investigators relied more on intuition and experience than structured psychological analysis. The killer seemed to possess a combination of technical skill, psychological control, and a kind of performative sadism that defied easy categorization. Public fascination with the case grew exponentially. What had begun as a local crime became a national obsession. Elizabeth Short was transformed from a real person into a cultural symbol, representing the fragility of dreams, the potential darkness lurking beneath societal surfaces, and the complex gender dynamics of mid-20th century America. The investigation revealed more about Los Angeles itself than about the specific murderer. The city, with its complex social hierarchies, its blend of glamour and grit, its intersection of dreams and brutal realities, became a character in the narrative. Elizabeth Short's murder was not just a crime, it was a window into the city's psychological landscape. Decades passed. Theories proliferated. Books were written. Documentaries were produced. Yet the fundamental mystery remained unsolved. The Black Dahlia case became more than an unsolved murder, it transformed into a cultural mythology, a narrative that spoke to deeper human fascinations with mystery, violence, and the unknowable. In the end, the investigation was less about finding a singular truth and more about exploring the complex psychological terrain where human motivation, societal dysfunction, and individual pathology intersect. Elizabeth Short became immortal, not through the Hollywood stardom she had once dreamed of, but through a tragedy that would captivate generations. The Black Dahlia murder remained an open wound in Los Angeles's collective memory, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to endure, some stories are too complex to be definitively resolved. The disappearance and murder of Elizabeth Short represent more than a singular criminal investigation, they are a profound cultural phenomenon that has transcended time, becoming a haunting narrative that continues to captivate generations of Americans. What began as a brutal crime in 1947 has evolved into a complex mixture of investigation, speculation, and cultural mythology. In the immediate aftermath of her murder, Los Angeles was consumed by an unprecedented level of investigative intensity. The Los Angeles Police Department deployed resources with a determination that reflected both professional obligation and personal obsession. Hundreds of potential suspects were interviewed, thousands of leads were pursued, and yet the killer remained frustratingly elusive. As years transformed into decades, the Black Dahlia case became something far more significant than a mere unsolved murder. It metamorphosed into a cultural artifact, a dark mirror reflecting the complex psychological landscapes of mid-20th century America. Amateur detectives, professional investigators, journalists, authors, and filmmakers would become inexorably drawn to Elizabeth Short's story, each attempting to unravel a mystery that seemed designed to resist resolution. The investigative landscape evolved dramatically over subsequent decades. What began as a localized criminal investigation transformed into a multi-generational intellectual pursuit. Each technological advancement, forensic DNA testing, advanced psychological profiling, digital archival research, offered new possibilities of resolution, yet simultaneously seemed to push the ultimate truth further into the realm of speculation. Perhaps most intriguingly, the case attracted a unique breed of investigators. Retired law enforcement officers, forensic specialists, true crime researchers, and even family members of potential suspects dedicated significant portions of their lives to understanding the intricate details of Elizabeth Short's final days and the circumstances of her murder. One of the most compelling investigative threads emerged through the work of Steve Hodel, a retired LAPD detective who became convinced that his own father, Dr. George Hodel, was responsible for Elizabeth Short's murder. Steve's exhaustive research, published in multiple books, presented a circumstantial but nonetheless provocative case. He meticulously documented his father's behavioral patterns, social connections, and potential psychological profile, suggesting a complex narrative of familial darkness and potential serial criminality. Dr. George Hodel emerges as a particularly fascinating figure in this ongoing mystery. A wealthy physician with connections to Los Angeles's artistic and medical elite, he represented a type of mid-century professional who existed at the intersection of respectability and potential psychological dysfunction. His sophisticated social standing, combined with documented bizarre behavioral patterns, made him a persistent suspect in both professional and amateur investigative circles. But Hodel was just one of numerous potential suspects. The investigative record is populated with a rogues gallery of individuals whose lives intersected with Elizabeth Short's complex social world. Former boyfriends, peripheral Hollywood characters, transient laborers, and individuals with documented psychological instabilities all became part of an elaborate investigative narrative. The forensic challenges were immense. In 1947, forensic science was in its infancy. Blood analysis, DNA testing, and advanced crime scene reconstruction were decades away from becoming standard investigative tools. Investigators relied primarily on traditional detective work, interviews, circumstantial evidence, and human intuition. Media played a transformative role in maintaining the case's cultural relevance. Newspapers, magazines, true crime publications, and eventually television documentaries ensured that Elizabeth Short's story remained a persistent cultural narrative. Each new publication, each new theory, reignited public fascination and speculation. The psychological profile of the killer became a subject of intense academic and investigative interest. Forensic psychologists and criminal profilers developed increasingly sophisticated methodologies to understand the potential motivations behind such an elaborately staged murder. The killer seemed to possess a unique combination of technical skill, psychological control, and a performative approach to violence that defied easy categorization. Interestingly, the case transcended traditional criminal investigation, becoming a complex cultural text that spoke to broader societal dynamics. Elizabeth Short represented a particular archetype of mid-20th century femininity, a young woman navigating the complex social landscapes of post-war urban America, where opportunity and exploitation existed in a delicate, dangerous balance. The murder itself seemed almost deliberately designed to generate ongoing speculation. The surgical precision of the body's mutilation, the careful positioning, the theatrical nature of the crime scene, all suggested something beyond a simple act of violence. This was a performance, a statement that seemed to invite ongoing interpretation and analysis. Multiple books, documentaries, and even Hollywood films have attempted to dramatize and explore the case. Each interpretation offers a slightly different perspective, a unique lens through which to understand this complex narrative. From James Ellroy's noir-inspired fictional exploration to more academic forensic analyses, the Black Dahlia case has become a multidimensional cultural artifact. As technological capabilities continue to advance, new investigative possibilities emerge. Advanced DNA testing, digital forensic techniques, and increasingly sophisticated psychological profiling methodologies offer hope, however slight, that the case might one day be resolved. Yet, paradoxically, many researchers and cultural observers suggest that complete resolution might ultimately diminish the case's cultural power. The mystery itself has become as significant as the potential truth. Elizabeth Short has transcended her individual existence to become a symbol, representing the complex, often brutal intersection of individual dreams and societal dysfunction. Decades after her murder, Elizabeth Short remains an enigma. She is simultaneously a victim, a cultural symbol, and a persistent mystery. Her story continues to challenge our understanding of human psychology, societal dynamics, and the complex narratives that emerge from seemingly inexplicable acts of violence. The Black Dahlia case serves as a profound reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be completely resolved. Some narratives derive their power precisely from their resistance to simple explanation, a testament to the complex, often inexplicable nature of human experience. In the end, Elizabeth Short's story is more than a murder investigation. It is a complex cultural text, a narrative that continues to evolve, challenge, and fascinate, a dark, enduring mystery that speaks to something profound and ultimately unknowable about the human condition. In the vast world of American criminal history, few stories resonate with the same haunting intensity as the murder of Elizabeth Short. Her tragic fate represents more than a singular act of violence. It is a complex narrative that speaks to the deepest, most unsettling aspects of human nature, societal dysfunction, and the thin line separating order from chaos. Los Angeles in the mid-20th century was a city of extraordinary contradictions. A metropolis built on dreams, where the golden promise of Hollywood intersected with the harsh realities of urban life. It was a landscape of perpetual transformation, where millions arrived seeking reinvention, only to discover that dreams often cast long, dark shadows. Elizabeth Short embodied this complex narrative. She was not just a victim, but a symbol, a young woman whose life and death became a canvas upon which multiple narratives could be projected. Her story transcended the immediate circumstances of her murder, becoming a cultural artifact that would captivate generations. The murder itself was so extraordinarily brutal that it seemed almost deliberately designed to generate ongoing fascination. The precision of the mutilation, the theatrical positioning of the body, the complete absence of blood at the crime scene, each element suggested something beyond a simple act of violence. This was a performance, a statement that challenged conventional understanding of criminal motivation. Forensically, the case presented unprecedented challenges. In 1947, criminal investigation was still fundamentally reliant on traditional detective work. Fingerprint analysis, blood typing, and rudimentary forensic techniques were the primary investigative tools. DNA testing, advanced psychological profiling, and digital forensic methodologies were decades away from becoming standard investigative practices. The Los Angeles Police Department approached the investigation with a combination of professional determination and growing psychological bewilderment. Hundreds of suspects were interviewed, thousands of leads pursued. Each potential narrative seemed to dissolve upon careful examination, each promising theory crumbled under rigorous scrutiny. What emerged was not just an investigation, but a complex psychological exploration of human darkness. The killer seemed to possess a unique combination of technical skill, psychological control, and a performative approach to violence that defied easy categorization. This was not a crime of passionate rage or spontaneous violence, but a carefully orchestrated act that seemed to invite ongoing interpretation. Public fascination with the case grew exponentially. Newspapers, always hungry for sensational narratives, transformed Elizabeth Short from a murder victim into a larger-than-life cultural symbol. The nickname Black Dahlia, borrowed from a popular film noir of the era, took on a life of its own, simultaneously romanticizing and commodifying her tragedy. The suspects were as complex and intriguing as the investigation itself. Dr. George Hodel, a wealthy physician with a reputation for unconventional behavior, emerged as a particularly compelling figure. His son, Steve Hodel, a retired LAPD detective, would later become convinced of his father's guilt, publishing multiple books detailing his investigation into the family's potentially dark history. But Hodel was just one of many. The investigative record is populated with a fascinating array of potential perpetrators. Former boyfriends, peripheral Hollywood characters, transient laborers, individuals with documented psychological complexities, each brought their own unique narrative, their own potential motivations. The psychological profile of the killer became a subject of intense academic and investigative interest. Forensic psychologists developed increasingly sophisticated methodologies to understand the potential motivations behind such an elaborately staged murder. The killer seemed to represent a particular psychological archetype, someone possessing technical skill, psychological control, and a performative approach to violence. Decades passed. Technological capabilities advanced. Digital archives were created. Forensic methodologies became increasingly sophisticated. Yet the fundamental mystery remained unresolved. The Black Dahlia case transformed from a criminal investigation into a cultural mythology, a narrative that spoke to deeper human fascinations with mystery, violence, and the unknowable. Elizabeth Short became immortal, not through the Hollywood stardom she had once dreamed of, but through a tragedy that would captivate generations. Her story represents more than an unsolved murder. It is a complex cultural text that continues to challenge our understanding of human psychology, societal dynamics, and the intricate narratives that emerge from seemingly inexplicable acts of violence. Amateur sleuths, professional investigators, authors, and filmmakers have all been drawn to her story. Each new book, each documentary, each theoretical exploration offers a slightly different perspective, a unique lens through which to understand this complex narrative. From James Ellroy's noir-inspired fictional interpretations to academic forensic analyses, the Black Dahlia case has become a multidimensional cultural artifact. Paradoxically, complete resolution might ultimately diminish the case's cultural power. The mystery itself has become as significant as the potential truth. Elizabeth Short has transcended her individual existence to become a symbol, representing the complex, often brutal intersection of individual dreams and societal dysfunction. As we continue to explore this enduring mystery, we are confronted with profound questions that extend far beyond the immediate circumstances of her murder. What drives human beings to commit acts of such extraordinary violence? How do societal structures and individual psychological landscapes intersect to create moments of profound darkness? The Black Dahlia case serves as a haunting reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be completely resolved. Some narratives derive their power precisely from their resistance to simple explanation, a testament to the complex, often inexplicable nature of human experience. In the end, Elizabeth Short's story is more than a murder investigation. It is a profound cultural narrative that continues to evolve, challenge, and fascinate, a dark, enduring mystery that speaks to something ultimately unknowable about the human condition. Her legacy is not just about her tragic death, but about the complex stories we continue to tell, the questions we continue to ask, and the human desire to understand the darkness that can occasionally emerge from seemingly ordinary circumstances. The Black Dahlia remains an open wound in our collective cultural memory, a reminder that some stories transcend their immediate context, becoming something far more significant than a simple criminal narrative.